Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Maybe you've never really thought about it, but Jesus seems to have had some special friends. Jesus loved everyone, of course, even those who killed him. But over and over in the gospel story, we find Jesus going off with Peter, James, and John. Jesus seemed to frequently take those three aside where they saw something happen or learned valuable lessons, while other disciples seemed nowhere to be found. But those weren't the only special friends Jesus had. The town of Bethany is just a couple of miles from Jerusalem, and another group of special friends of Jesus lived there: Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. This week we are looking at women in the Bible who all happened to be named Mary. Yesterday we talked some about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and today we want to look at one of those special friends of Jesus who happened to be named Mary as well. Perhaps the first thing to say is that these three were all from one family. Lazarus, Martha, and Mary were brother and sisters, and while we aren't told how it happened, when they first appear, they are all avid followers of Jesus. To remind you, it is Lazarus who died and who was raised by Jesus, and it was this event that was the final straw for the priests and Sadducees that caused them to begin plotting Jesus' death. Martha is often viewed as the practical sister, focused on tasks and getting things done. Their sister Mary, on the other hand, is often viewed as a woman led by her heart. The first time we encounter Mary of Bethany was when Jesus was visiting in their home. Obviously, by the time they appear in the gospel story, Mary and her siblings were already followers of Jesus, and in this story found in Luke, we see that they were hosting Jesus during his stay in Bethany. Now, by this time, Jesus had gained some notoriety, so many of the townspeople had come to see and hear Jesus too. Martha is doing what any good hostess would do. She was busying herself with all the tasks involved with hosting Jesus and the other townspeople. She was cooking and cleaning and running around and seeing to 1,000 tasks. Meanwhile, Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening. Finally, Martha had had enough, and she complained to Jesus that her sister was sitting there doing nothing and had left everything to Martha to do. But Jesus replied that he wasn't always going to be around, and that listening to him was more important than any of the tasks that Martha had busied herself with. Mary was growing in her faith. Mary was growing in devotion. Mary had chosen the better thing. The second time we encounter Mary of Bethany involved another time that Jesus had come for a visit. But now, things were a little more intense. Opposition to Jesus was beginning to grow, and Jesus and his disciples were in Galilee, far away from Jerusalem and the headquarters of his enemies. That's when word reached Jesus that Lazarus had fallen ill. Remember that Bethany was just a couple of miles from Jerusalem, and the disciples tried to dissuade Jesus from going back to his enemy's stronghold. Still, Jesus went. When he arrived, he first encountered Martha, who said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Then she and Jesus have a theological discussion that ends with Jesus saying that he was the resurrection and the life. Then Jesus goes ahead and encounters Mary, who says the exact same words: "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Then the Bible tells us that Jesus saw her weeping, and instead of a discussion like he had just had with Martha, he simply and tenderly asks, "Where have you laid him?" and then Jesus weeps with her. I think the point that Jesus responds in different ways with the two sisters who say the same thing indicates that Jesus meets us where we are and offers himself in just the way we need. Finally, we see Mary one more time in the gospel. Martha, Mary, and the risen Lazarus give a dinner in Jesus' honor, and while they are at the dinner, Mary takes a pound of costly perfume, breaks the flask, and anoints Jesus' feet with her perfume, and dries his feet with her hair. Judas doesn't like that she did this, saying that the perfume could have been sold and the money used to feed the poor. But Jesus says that she is foreshadowing his death and burial, caring for his body in advance of the events that were to happen to him. In her actions, she showed her love and devotion. The story ends with the priests and even more scandalized because people were flocking to Jesus and abandoning their leadership. Again, they began to plot against Jesus. Oftentimes, these two sisters are compared to each other. The world needs Marthas, to be sure. We need folks who get up and get things done, those who bring ministry and care for others into action. That's important. But at times, we all need some Mary in us too, taking advantage of the time to fill ourselves with Jesus, to live and experience and express what God had poured into our hearts. Mary filled her heart with Jesus and then expressed that in love for God. Maybe sometimes we are and should be like Martha. Maybe sometimes we are and should be like Mary. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Jesus called us special friends? Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.